Welcome, confidential listeners, to a place where the air is so thick with secrets you can taste the salt on your tongue. Tonight we find ourselves in the French Quarter of New Orleans, a city where the line between prayer and curse is as thin as a lace curtain. This is Clara's confession. A woman who learned that when you try to bend the universe to your will, it usually snaps back and breaks your neck. It is a diary of a forbidden crush, a ritual performed in the dead of night, and a chocolate cake that served a plate of pure ruin. Titled, I Put a Prohibited Ingredient in His Cake. Now he won't stop hunting me. So, bolt the door, turn down the gas lamps, and listen closely, because the audience for this truth is only you.
New Orleans in July is a fever dream. The humidity clings to your skin like a damp shroud, and the smell of blooming jasmine mixes with the faint metallic scent of the Mississippi River. I was 23, living with my parents in a narrow 2-story house with wrought iron balconies that groaned in the wind. I felt like a prisoner of my own youth, waiting for something or someone to crack the silence of my life. The house next door had been a tomb for months, its windows boarded up and its garden overgrown with weeds that looked like reaching fingers. Then they arrived, Matthew, his wife Lucille, and their young son. I remember the exact second I saw him. He was hauling a heavy mahogany dresser off the back of the truck, his shirt soaked with sweat, his muscles strained under the midday sun. He looked up, and for a heartbeat I thought he saw me behind the lace curtains of my bedroom. My heart didn't just beat, it stuttered, a jagged rhythm I hadn't felt in years. He was 10 years older, a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders with a grace that made me ache. I began to build a shrine of observations, the way he took his coffee on the porch at 6 a.m., the low rumble of his voice when he talked to the postman, and the way he looked in the dim light of the street lamps when he came home late from work. I wasn't just watching a neighbor, I was studying a masterpiece that belonged to someone else. I made it my mission to get close. I used my mother as a shield, bringing over peach cobbler and offering to help Lucille find the best markets in the quarter. Lucille was kind, too kind. She had a laugh like silver bells and eyes that sparkled with a genuine warmth that made my stomach turn with a toxic mix of envy and guilt. Every time she invited me in for iced tea, I felt like a spy behind enemy lines, smiling at the wife while my soul was reaching for the husband in the next room. The obsession didn't stay behind the curtains for long. It started to bleed into my reality, making me bold in ways that terrified me. A few months after they moved in, they invited us over for their son's birthday party. The house was filled with the smell of vanilla cake and the loud, brassy sounds of a local jazz record. I found myself wandering away from the crowd, drawn to the quiet of their study, a room that smelled of old books and Matthew's expensive tobacco. There, on a silver-trimmed sideboard, sat a portrait. It was Matthew, looking straight into the camera with a half-smile that felt like a challenge. In a moment of pure adrenaline-fueled madness, I reached out. My fingers brushed the cold metal, and before my brain could scream "stop," I slipped the frame into my oversized handbag. The weight of it felt like a lead brick, a stolen piece of his life now pressing against my hip. I spent that night huddled in my bed, the silver frame resting on my chest. I traced the lines of his face in the dark, imagining he was there with me, whispering my name instead of hers. But the photo wasn't enough. It was a cold, flat substitute for the heat of the man. The more I looked at him, the more I realized that being the nice neighbor was a slow death. I needed a shortcut. I needed a way to make him see me the way I saw him, as the only person who truly understood the darkness behind his eyes. I started spending my nights in the dark corners of the local libraries and the occult shops of the quarter, looking for something stronger than a smile. I wasn't looking for a prayer. I was looking for a tether. I wanted to bind him to me so tightly that he couldn't breathe without thinking of my name, unaware that the universe was already preparing to teach me a lesson in the language of irony. Desperation has its own scent, and on that Friday at midnight, it smelled of steam and secrets. I had found what I was looking for in a dark corner of the web, something the old women of the Bayou would call a binding, but to me, it was my only lifeline. The rules were cruel and intimate. I had to perform the ritual at the deepest point of the night, when the veil between worlds is thinnest and sins are easier to hide. I waited until my father's footsteps ceased upstairs and the house plunged into a sepulchral silence, broken only by the rhythmic creaking of the floorboards. In the gloom of the kitchen, lit only by the flickering bluish light of the gas stove, I began. The hardest part, the part that made my stomach do somersaults, was boiling my own undergarment. The water bubbled noisily, releasing a dense steam that seemed to carry my very essence into the humid New Orleans air. I felt like a witch out of the fairy tales I used to read, but there was nothing enchanted about this. It was raw, it was dirty, and it was desperate. I mixed that water into the bitter chocolate, every turn of the wooden spoon feeling like a heartbeat. "Eat and be mine," I whispered to the dark, glossy batter. "Eat and forget the way back to her." I pronounced Matthew's name 7 times, feeling the weight of each syllable as if I were carving them into my own chest. I wasn't just baking a cake, I was weaving a spider's web made of sugar and shadows, firmly believing that I was the predator and not the prey. The smell of the chocolate baking began to fill the house, a rich, seductive aroma that masked the sinister nature of what I was doing. I sat on the kitchen floor, guarding the oven door as if it were the gate to a sanctuary. Every minute that passed was a promise that Matthew would soon be crawling to my door. I was exhausted, but the adrenaline of my own madness kept me awake, watching the shadows of the magnolia trees dance on the walls like specters celebrating my fall. Saturday morning. The New Orleans sun rose pitilessly, turning the humidity into a golden fog that seemed to stifle the street. I covered the cake with a thick layer of chocolate frosting, hiding the evidence of my ritual under an appearance of domestic sweetness. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the porcelain plate as I crossed the small garden that separated our houses. Every step felt like an eternity, and the weight of the silver frame I had stolen weeks before felt like a branding iron in my bag. Lucille met me at the door. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, but her smile was still that blinding, genuine light that made me want to shrink into the shadows. "Morning, Lucille. I was doing some baking last night, stuck with insomnia, and I thought Matthew and the family might like a slice of this chocolate fudge cake." She beamed at me, her fingers brushing mine as she took the plate.
That small contact felt like an electric shock of guilt. I watched her take it into the cool darkness of her hallway, imagining the cake sitting on their dining table like a Trojan horse. I didn't stay for coffee. I couldn't. I hurried back to my porch, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I waited. I spent the rest of the day looking through the slats of my blinds, watching their front door, waiting for the magic to take hold of the man I loved, unaware that I had just handed a loaded weapon to the one man I never wanted to see. The following week felt like a slow-motion car crash. I spent every waking hour watching Matthew from my window, looking for a sign, a lingering glance toward my porch, a sudden coldness toward Lucille, a spark of the fire I had tried to ignite. But he remained the same, a distant, polite statue of a man, moving through the humidity with a quiet dignity that ignored my existence entirely. Every time I saw him, I felt the ritual's failure like a physical weight in my chest. Then came Sunday evening. The sun was a dying ember over the Mississippi, casting long, distorted shadows across our gardens. I was outside, absent-mindedly brushing the dirt from my dog's fur, when I heard a voice call out from the other side of the brick wall. My heart leaped. I thought it was him. I thought the 7 days were up and he was finally coming to claim me. But when I looked up, the figure leaning over the moss-covered stones wasn't Matthew. It was James, his brother-in-law. "Clara! Lord, I've been waiting to catch you all day. Lucille told me to bring this back to you." He handed me the porcelain plate, now filled with a heap of greasy pancakes, as a thank you gesture. But it was what he said next that turned my blood into ice water. "He have to tell you, that chocolate cake, I think I ate almost the whole thing myself. I couldn't stop. It was like I was addicted to it." I stared at him, my mouth dry as bone. Did Matthew have any?" I managed to choke out. James laughed, a sound that felt like a mockery of my soul. "Matthew? No, he's a newly diagnosed diabetic, Clara. He hasn't touched a gram of sugar in a month. He's been on a strict no-carb kick. It was just me and Lucille, and mostly me." The world tilted. I had boiled my intimacy and whispered my heart into a batter that had been consumed by the one man I didn't care about. I had cast a spell of obsession, and I had snared a stray dog instead of the wolf. The ritual didn't fail. It worked with a terrifying, twisted precision. James, who had been a quiet background figure for the past year, suddenly became a constant, suffocating presence. It was as if the chocolate had rewired his brain. He started lingering by the fence at dawn, waiting for me to step outside. He sent me dozens of messages a day, meaningless, rambling poems and photos of the sunset, each one a digital tether pulling me closer to a man I found repulsive. "I can't stop thinking about you, Clara. There's something about you, something magnetic. I feel like we're connected in a way I can't explain." I felt like I was being haunted by a ghost I had summoned myself. Every time I went to the market, he was there, coincidentally bumping into me among the stalls of spices and rot. His eyes had a glazed, feverish look that made my skin crawl. He wasn't just attracted, he was possessed. And the worst part was the encouragement from the next house over. Lucille started dropping hints, smiling at me over the garden wall with a matchmaking twinkle in her eye. "Our James is quite taken with you, Clara. He's a good man. Maybe you should give him a chance. It would be so wonderful to be family, wouldn't it?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to vomit the truth onto her clean white porch. I had built a cage for Matthew, and now I was the one locked inside it with James. The humidity of New Orleans felt like it was thickening, pressing against my lungs until I couldn't breathe. I was drowning in the sugar trap I had set for another man, watching Matthew through the windows of his house, seeing him happy and oblivious, while his brother-in-law breathed down my neck with a love that felt like a curse. The humidity in New Orleans doesn't just sit on you, it invades you, making every nerve ending feel frayed and raw. For 3 weeks, I lived under James's gaze. He was like a shadow that had gained weight, a permanent fixture at the edge of my vision. He started leaving small gifts on my porch, hand-picked wildflowers that wilted within an hour in the heat, and scrapbooks of photos he'd taken of me through the fence. I felt like I was being watched by a predator that thought it was a poet. One Tuesday afternoon, the storm that had been brewing in the Gulf finally hit the city, but the real thunder was inside me. James cornered me in the narrow alleyway between our houses, the rain turning the dirt into a slick black mud. He reached out to touch my face, his fingers cold and trembling with a devotion that made my stomach turn. Clara, please, I know you feel it too. This connection, it's not human. It's like the universe made us for each other. Something inside my brain snapped. All the weeks of watching Matthew, all the guilt of the ritual, and the sheer disgust of James's touch collided in a single violent explosion of truth. Stop it, James. Just stop. I don't want you. I never wanted you. Don't you understand? You are a mistake. The cake wasn't for you. I love Matthew. I've always loved Matthew. You're just the fool who ate the bait. The words hung in the heavy, wet air like a death sentence. James froze, his hand still inches from my face. The glazed look in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, jagged clarity that was far more terrifying than his obsession. I realized in that heartbeat that I hadn't just rejected a man, I had confessed to a crime against his family. I saw the gears turning behind his eyes, the obsession curdling into a dark, vindictive betrayal. I'd handed him the truth, and he was going to use it like a blade.
James didn't say a word. He just turned and walked into the rain, his silhouette disappearing into the gray mist. I stood there, drenched and trembling, knowing that the clock had finally run out. An hour later, the silence was shattered by a pounding at my front door that felt like it was going to take the house off its hinges. I opened it to find Lucille. She wasn't the sweet iced tea sipping neighbor anymore. She looked like an avenging spirit, her face flushed with a lethal mixture of shock and hatred. James stood behind her, his face a mask of bitter satisfaction. "You snake! You backstabbing, filthy little snake! You've been eyeing my husband while you smiled in my face? You thought you could cast your spells on Matthew in my own home?" She didn't wait for an answer. She lunged forward, her nails clawing at my skin, grabbing my hair with a strength fueled by 10 years of marriage. I fell back against the hallway wall, the silver frame of Matthew's photo clattering out of my bag and onto the floor, the glass shattering into 1,000 mocking diamonds. Lucille saw it. She saw the stolen photo, and her scream reached a pitch that brought the entire neighborhood to their porches. "She's a thief, a homewrecker. She's trying to steal my life." The scandal was instantaneous. I saw the curtains twitch in every house on the block. I saw the judgmental eyes of the old women who lived across the street, their mouths forming silent prayers of condemnation.
I was being dragged into the light, stripped of my dignity in front of the world I had tried so hard to blend into. I looked up, praying for a miracle, and that's when I saw him, Matthew. He was standing on his porch, watching the chaos with a look of such profound, icy detachment that it hurt more than Lucille's blows. I had wanted him to see me, and now, God help me, he finally did.
The screaming stopped eventually. Lucille was pulled away by the neighbors, her sobbing breaths catching in the thick, humid air. I sat on my porch steps, my lip bleeding, staring at the shards of the silver photo frame scattered around my feet like broken glass in a gutter. The neighborhood felt like a courtroom where I had already been sentenced without a trial. Then I heard the heavy, deliberate thud of boots on the wooden stairs. I looked up, and my heart, the foolish, broken thing, actually fluttered for a second. It was Matthew. He didn't reach out to help me up. He didn't even look angry. He looked at me with a cold, clinical disgust that made me feel smaller than the ants crawling on the pavement. I heard what you said to James. I saw the photo. My wife is inside packing her things to go to her mother's because she thinks I had something to do with your sickness.
Matthew, please. I did it because I loved you. I did it because I couldn't breathe without...
Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. You're a predator, Clara. You're a girl who plays with dolls and calls it destiny. Stay away from my family. If I see you near my house, my wife, or my son ever again, the police won't be the ones you're afraid of. You're a ghost to me now. Get out of my sight. He turned his back on me and walked away. It wasn't the dramatic, romantic confrontation I had imagined in my midnight kitchen. There was no fire, no passion, just the sound of a door slamming shut and the realization that the man I worshipped thought I was nothing more than a stain on his shoes. The spell hadn't brought him to me. It had shown him exactly what I was, a desperate thief of hearts who ended up with empty hands. They moved away 3 weeks later. They didn't even wait for the for sale sign to go up. They just loaded a truck under the cover of a thunderstorm and vanished into the fog of the quarter. The house next door is a tomb once again. The garden overgrown with weeds that now seem to mock me every time I look out my window. My parents don't speak to me. The neighbors cross the street when they see me coming. I am the girl who tried to bake a miracle and served a catastrophe. I'm 30 now, and I still live in that narrow house. I still hear the ghost of Matthew's voice in the rumble of the evening thunder. James still sends me letters sometimes, creepy, stained envelopes from 3 towns over, filled with rants about how we're meant to be. The ritual tied me to him with a knot that even time can't unpick. I am haunted by a man I hate, while the man I love treats my name like a curse. I still have one shard of that silver frame. I keep it in my jewelry box, a jagged reminder that in New Orleans, the spirits don't give you what you want. They give you exactly what you deserve. I reached for the sun and ended up with a mouthful of ash. I am a cautionary tale told in whispers over iced tea. A woman who learned too late that some doors are meant to stay locked and some hungers should never be fed. And so the archive closes on Clara, a woman who found out that the shortest path to a man's heart is often a dead end. A story of sugar, shadows, and the lethal price of a secret obsession. If this journey through the wreckage of a New Orleans ritual has stayed with you, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. Help us continue to unbox these hidden truths from the secrets inbox. Click the bell icon so you're always there when the next secret is revealed. But I have to ask you, confidential listeners, was Clara's punishment too high a price for a lonely heart? Or did she cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Share your truth in the comments below. Because in the French Quarter, the only thing more dangerous than a curse is a woman with a plan and nothing left to lose. Until next time, stay safe and keep your secrets close. Good night.